Thank you for joining us. Rishi Sunak has pulled something off that Boris Johnson couldn't.
He has, Geeta. It seems as though Rishi Sunak is riding a high here. As you say, this was something that Boris Johnson attempted but couldn't quite get over the line. And I think looking at that joint press conference, the overriding feeling of warmth between Ursula von der Leyen and Rishi Sunak was something that we just haven't seen in the relationship between prime ministers and other leaders in the European Union before. So I think there is clearly warmer relations there that might not have been possible under Boris Johnson, given how much of Brexit is wrapped up in his personal brand. Rishi Sunak comes in without that burden, and I think clearly he's been able to achieve something very substantial today.
And when you think back to the acrimony and the difficulty of the last few years, do you think this does potentially draw a line under it and take UK-EU relations into a different direction?
Well, that was certainly the atmospherics and the mood music around that press conference. It seemed as though there was talk about the UK's involvement potentially in Horizon. There was talk around being able to have a greater and warmer relationship between the EU and the UK on a number of different issues. Ursula von der Leyen spoke about the joint response to Russia in light of the invasion of Ukraine. So it seems as though there is a shift in dialogue, in certainly in the tone of that dialogue between the UK and the EU. And it's something that clearly wasn't possible under Rishi Sunak's predecessor. So it's something that he will want to be able to build upon. But as we saw with the previously negotiated Northern Ireland Protocol, the proof was in the pudding. It all looks good on paper, but ultimately once it's in action, that will be the true test of whether or not it works for all parties, Northern Ireland, the UK and the EU included.
And why do you think we are seeing this change now? Is it to do with who is in the hot seat in Downing Street? Is it that we've seen a change in relations anyway, given the Ukraine situation? Is it because time has passed and there is a real problem in Northern Ireland that lots of people want to resolve?
I think it's a combination of all three, Geeta. I do think that, as I say, personality of Rishi Sunak is a key point here. I think that the cooperation that's required between the UK and the EU is now more urgent because of what's happening in Ukraine. And then finally, as you say, there is an issue in Northern Ireland with businesses being able to trade freely with the rest of Great Britain, and that was becoming a serious problem, and the implementation of the protocol just wasn't going to work in its current format. So we'll have to dissect the detail of that deal, and there isn't a great deal of detail out there currently beyond what's been said publicly. But the fact that Steve Baker is taking to the airwaves and supporting it wholeheartedly, I think will be music to Rishi Sunak's ears. And there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of resistance to the deal based on what we know so far. Now, obviously, the next flashpoint will be what happens in Parliament, but so far so good for the Prime Minister and his team.
And that's despite the fact that Ursula von der Leyen made clear that despite this sort of break, the Stormont break, the European Court of Justice still has a final say on those single market issues. That was a very contentious area for some.
Yes, indeed. And I think that is the one area where there is a bit of doubt. The fact that the European Court of Justice will still have a level of input in what happens in Northern Ireland. But as Steve Baker mentioned in the previous interview you did with him there isn't necessarily a huge amount of backlash to that initially. It seems to be that compromises have to be recognised and compromises have to be made. And at the moment, if there is only 3% of EU law in practice in the UK, in Northern Ireland, then it seems as though those opportunities for flashpoints are reduced. So although that is the contentious point, it seems as though the rest of it, looking at the deal in a whole, seems to be taken on good faith.
Leon and Emirali, thank you.